you ever wondered how some people actually start a fat loss or a weight loss program and they get quick, immediate results, and you're like, why doesn't that happen to me? Well, I have the secret and what that is and what those people probably do and you don't do, and we'll cover that today. All right, in today's video, we're talking about a couple things, but number one, I started it off with like, how do these people, you see people will start a program, 6 weeks, boom, they've lost 10 pounds, they look great, totally transforming their body. And then other people will say they're starting something and 12 weeks later, they might look the same or a little bit of change. So obviously there's a lot of factors that we can talk about when it comes to your nutrition, when it comes to your training. But today what I want to talk about and what usually is the difference that I find with a lot of my clients who actually, when they follow through, when they get the results that they're looking for, is it comes down to their environment. Again, a lot of these things that we're talking about, they're not super sexy. They're not the things like, hey, is this the magic supplement? Is this the magic pill, the magic workout, the magic food? No, it's actually the basics. People don't want to hear this. But if you want to actually look your best, feel your best, working the basics are what will get you there. And your environment and how you set up your environment will make a huge impact on that. So let's talk about that. So today we're going to talk about environment. And when we look at environment, there's a lot of different things you can, obviously environment means a lot of things, right? It's a big subject. But in the confines of someone looking to lose weight, let's just start with the house, start with like where you're actually living. That's usually the place to start. So that could be, let's talk about food. So that could be like, what do you have foods that you probably are trying to eliminate from your current nutrition plan? Is there something that's probably not going to be the best for you? So from an environment perspective, it's just, you would probably want to remove those out of your environment, out of your kitchen, and replace those with things that are actually going to be conducive to what you're trying to do. So supportive nutrients and foods, etc. So that's one thing. Environment can also, this is probably the bigger issue, is who you surround yourself with. If you're going on this plan of a health and wellness plan and a weight loss plan, and you're currently spending most of your time with people who that's just not important, it's not on their radar, they don't work out, eating healthy is not a thing, that's going to be a challenge. So that's part of your environment. The last thing I'm saying is that you want to like get rid of these people or lose them out of your life, but some people do. I will admit that, but you don't have to. You don't have to go that extreme, but I would recommend that you have to actually find some type of balance where you're like, hey, for example, like if your whole weekend is around just hitting restaurants, eating and drinking, and you do that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you're going on a weight loss plan, you know intellectually that's just not going to work. I see it all the time. I see people that are in the gym, they're willing to do the workouts, but when it comes to actually changing their nutrition and maybe cutting down drinking alcohol's a big one, just for example, and they don't see the changes, and they can't figure out, so they try to work out harder. It doesn't work that way. So from an environmental perspective, like who are you spending the most of your time with? Are you spending time with that's going to support you in what you're doing? You need to think about those things. You need to try to figure out ways to incorporate that into your current lifestyle, so it's going to be you'll be able to stay on your plan in terms of hitting your goal. So people and where you spend your time is going to be a big one. It's probably the biggest one when it comes to your environment. It's going to be where you spend your time and who you hang around with. So you're going to have to figure that one out. It can be a challenge, especially, I'll give you an example, like, so if it's a husband and wife, if one spouse is looking to make that change, the other spouse could care less, they're going to eat whatever they want, they're not going to support that person, that's a challenge. It's way better when they do it together, when they're on the same page, for sure. There's no question about that. It's not always the way it is. The one thing I'd recommend is as long as they can just be supportive, hey, you do you. And the one thing I would say when it comes to that from the spouse situation is like, just if you're making this change, it's your change. You need to make that change. As great as it would be that they would support you and maybe change their habits too, it's not about them, it's about you, and you can't blame them just because they're eating whatever it is they're eating or drinking whatever it is they're drinking. You made a different choice. You just have to be okay with that. That's difficult. That can be a challenge, but that's something that you need to think about, especially if you have a partner or spouse married or etc. In that it's gonna be difficult. So it doesn't have to be. I said it's gonna be difficult. That's probably a poor choice of words. It's only difficult if you see it as being difficult. So, you want to look at it as like, okay, so in other words, if you know going in that your spouse is not going to support you in that role, at least you know that. At least you know what you need to do, what parameters you need to set up to make yourself successful. It's the same thing with hanging out with people. So if you're going to go out a Friday night with people and you're just letting them know, for example, you're going to eat something healthy and you're not going to have as many drinks. You're either not drinking or having one drink, something like that. They just have to be okay with it, but you have to be okay with it. You can't worry about what other people are thinking. So that's a huge thing. So from an environmental perspective, people and where you spend your time is going to be huge. We already talked a little bit about kitchen type of thing, having the foods that you need in your house. Obviously that makes it a lot easier for sure. So there's other things too, is like what's from an environmental perspective, like get you to think about what obstacles are in your way, like keeping you from going to the gym, getting to bed on time, people that you're spending time with. These are things that you need to think about. Like what are they, what's positive, what's going to be supportive in your goal, and then what's going to be an obstacle that you need to remove. So the point that I'm making here is when you can kind of take a proactive approach versus, meaning like, all right, so what obstacles are going to be in my way? What do I need to think about to make sure that I have a plan for? Versus waiting till the problem happens, the challenge happens, and then you're like, oh, what do I do now? Then you get frustrated, you give into temptation, you can give into peer pressure, whatever the situation may be, but it just makes it that much more difficult. Versus when you have a plan or you know that these obstacles are coming up and you're ready to deal with them, you're solid, you're good to go. So I would highly recommend that you take an inventory of your whole environment, of what does that mean? People, places, things, whether that's family obligations, work obligations, what are those things? You have to take an inventory of what your current life is from an environmental perspective, match that up to what you're trying to do, and figure where you need to mix and match of what you need to kind of make some changes and changes in terms of like, well, maybe I'm not going to do that, maybe I'm going to add this, maybe I'm going to pull this out, maybe I'm going to skip this weekend's whatever it may be, certain things. But if you actually take the proactive approach versus the reactive approach, it's much easier to stay on track from a weight loss perspective or health perspective, whatever you're looking to do, versus just winging it. Winging it never works. Trust me on that. If I have a simple example would be if I have two clients that come to me and they have the exact same goals, and they're from the same starting point, they're twins, and one actually figures out a plan, looks at the plan that we have to implement, and figures out where the challenges are going to be and what she needs to do or he needs to do in his life, her life, to make that happen, versus the other person that says, oh yeah, this looks good, I'll start it tomorrow, and doesn't think anything about it. I know who's going to succeed. You know who's going to succeed. It's the person who actually looked at it and had a plan and said, okay, I got some challenges coming up. How am I going to deal with these? What do I need to do? What do I need to put in place to make sure that I can stay on plan, stay on track? And what happens is when you do this and you build this up, it's just like a muscle. You get stronger at it. All of a sudden, after a month, after 8 weeks, 12 weeks, it becomes easy. It becomes versus week one, it's difficult because it's completely counterintuitive to what you're used to. So, but when you build it up and all of a sudden 12 weeks later, you're like, hey, this is just what I do. It becomes habitual and your environment becomes much more supportive to what you're trying to do. So bottom line is take inventory of your environment and be proactive in the changes that you need to make.